Deputy Thomas P. Broughan.
Well, as you know, Minister, a few weeks ago there were almost 2,500 homeless children across the country, with over 2,000 of those in Dublin alone. Now, in July, you held a summit, I think, of agencies working on the front line with homeless families, including Focus Ireland, ISPCC and Barnardo's, and you promised a whole series of concrete and costed supports, including free transport, more nourishing food, creche placements and so on. Yet we heard, I think, just last month from Focus Ireland, you delivered virtually none of those steps, and my own experience representing families is that you have delivered nothing.
Thank you. And Tara.
Okay, I appreciate the question, Deputy Broughan. Homelessness among children and families remains a serious problem. In September, there were 1,173 families in emergency accommodation, including 1,568 adults and 2,426 dependents. I am committed to supporting the implementation of Rebuilding Ireland, the Action Plan for Housing and Homelessness. We have made some progress in this regard, but more remains to be done. The Dublin Regional Homeless Executive is working to provide free public transport for family travel and school journeys for those homeless families in the Dublin region who are residing in hotel accommodation. Each family is being given 5 24-hour family leap cards, which will be valid for use on all Dublin transport systems, allowing for family days out at weekends or during holiday periods. Distributions of the family cards is almost complete. This will be quickly followed by distribution of school journey cards. Another part of the commitment had to do with in relation to the issue around nutrition and food. My department is funding research commissioned by Focus Ireland to identify issues regarding access to food and potential nutritional impacts on families in emergency homeless accommodation. My department is also enhancing access to early years services for homeless families through a new community childcare subvention scheme for homeless children. It will provide part-time childcare for children aged between 0 and 6 years of age. It is planned to launch the scheme next January. Also, I recently secured the agreement of the Minister for Housing, Planning, Community and Local Government that the provision for accommodation for young people leaving state care would be eligible for funding under the Capital Assistance Scheme operated by his department. So my department in Tusla will work to ensure that any accommodation proposed and ultimately delivered will be provided with the appropriate levels of protective factors for the young person making the transition to independent living.
And indeed the community childcare subvention. Can I just ask you about you promised some action on developing a voluntary safety guidance code for hotel staff, and you were to work with ISPCC to develop this, given the fact that children obviously are using locations where there's no Garda vetting of staff or indeed of visitors coming or going. And as you know, we had in one of the large hotels on the north side where homeless children live, we had an assassination not that long ago. I could just ask you, secondly, you promised also in relation, in coordination with the Department of Health, that you provide additional childcare support workers to work with the homeless children and develop care plans. So how many of those support workers have you actually, yourself and the Department of Health, managed to put in place? You also promised some action in relation to children with disability and supports for them, and also to the particular problem of families fleeing domestic violence. I note what you said about nutrition, but the reality is, of course, people still depend very often on McDonald's, Burger King and so on and so forth, and have absolutely no provision for cooking. And that's one of the reasons, obviously, we need urgent action.
Deputy O'Leary, you had a supplementary.
Yes, briefly, Minister, we had recently it was reported Edale House, which is a shelter in Cork that deals with women and children, had to turn away 281 children last year, which is a reflection of how serious that problem is in Cork. But I suppose just on the issue of families, and it's an issue that's come to my attention, A number of families have said to me that they are concerned and worried about registering as homeless, particularly families that are in contact with TUSLA for whatever reason, but good families doing the best for their children. They are worried about registering as homeless and availing of emergency accommodation because of their fear of the view that TUSLA will take of that. So can you give an assurance that the Department and that TUSLA will contact the homeless services and ensure that they will make every effort in all circumstances to house family units together?
Minister, a minute to conclude.
To both, thank you. Okay, Deputy Broughan, the Dublin Regional Health Homeless Executive, our best place to advise, housing executive, best place to advise on a safety guidance voluntary code for child safety and emergency accommodation. So I understand that they have worked with TUSLA to draft national quality standards to cover this area of the action plan, and that an information guidelines booklet is also being developed in line with this objective. You also asked in relation to the process of identifying, we are also working with the DRHE, is in the process of identifying the most appropriate accommodation setting for services assisting pregnant women who are homeless. It's intended that a model of extended service provision will then be developed and rolled out, most likely on a phased basis once such premises have been secured. We have already provided 2 workers to work with Focus Ireland in terms of working with families in emergency accommodation. In terms of the budget for 2017, I'm working with TUSLA in relation to identifying if we can provide additional support workers in that regard, as well as discussing that with the Department of Health. In relation to Deputy O'Leary, yes, I can make those assurances in terms of your question.
Again, for responding to 1 or 2 of the items I've raised. The reality is, though, of course, that on Christmas Day we will have at least 2,500 children, in a homeless situation, and every month you've been minister, we get an additional 80 homeless families. You mentioned, I know Minister Coveney obviously has a primary responsibility in relation to this, but you have responsibility of care for the children concerned. You've made a commitment, I think, that by mid-2017. We won't have the hotels being used, guest houses being used, this type of accommodation for very vulnerable families and children. Are you remotely, though, as a government, on target to fulfil that? And in the interim, is it possible to see that the commitment you made, I think, last July to the key agencies, that all of the commitments in that will be delivered? And just a final point in relation to those fleeing domestic violence that I just wanted to mention. Families sometimes, very often, a woman fleeing domestic abuse and violence with her family is obviously, is her name would be co-tenant or co-owner of a house, and it's not possible for her to immediately access homeless services, and perhaps that's something you might take up as well. Thanks, Catherine. Or Cam.
Last point, yes, I think that is an important point, and I will take that on. In terms of your initial set of points there, in terms of the overall impact of the plan of rebuilding Ireland and the numbers of children are increasing in terms of who are homeless, I am aware of that. We had and I am aware of also the efforts by Minister Coveney in order to addressing that and also setting that very ambitious objective at our last committee meeting yesterday in relation to reviewing what's going on in terms of the housing plan. 2 of the key aspects in order to meet those targets have to do with how well we're doing on the rapid build program. 1,500 rapid build units are to be delivered by 2018. Approximately 350 rapid build units are advancing or will be on site by the end of 2016, and a further 650 rapid build units will be initiated and delivered in 2017. So that has something to do with the increase. Secondly, I think in terms of another aspect of that increase and trying to reduce that increase would have to do with reforming and providing the homeless, the HAP program. There is a homeless pilot for the HAP scheme, which has been operational since February of 2015, reforming that and ensuring that that will be more effective in targeting and creating approximately 550 tenancies by the time that's completed.
Thank you very much.